Welcome to No Apologies. I'm Dana Lash. The first referendum on the Biden administration took place in Virginia. Really, a number of municipal elections, but specifically the ones we're watching are Virginia and New Jersey. Of course, can't leave out New York City as well and their mayor. All of this on the ballot. And as I said yesterday, it's not just Glenn Youngkin and Terry McAuliffe and Jack Ciattarelli and Phil Murphy, but the Biden administration itself. Now, my contention is that the Democrat Party, they've made racism, calling everyone who, I'm so tired of talking about the racism issue. I literally want to jump off my roof and break my legs down to nubbins because it bores the hell out of me. The question, by and large, is whether or not America's buying into all of this stuff, or are they actually just looking at issues, right? That's what you think. So yesterday was a resounding, let's go Brandon, from a lot of moms and dads and just voters across the country in all of these areas where these elections were taking place. Specifically, Virginia, that's the one that everybody was watching. The Democrat Party and their racial essentialism lost. They lost on every single level. House of Delegates, they had a full three sweep of their governor, their lieutenant governor, and their attorney general. First time, by the way, since 2009 that a gubernatorial candidate, soon to be governor, won by +10 in a pretty purplish state, pretty blue state that went +10, not just a year ago, barely a year ago for Biden. So you got a huge swing there, a huge difference. Now, New Jersey, this is what's really weird. This is deep blue Biden territory, New Jersey. You have Democrat incumbent Phil Murphy for the gubernatorial race. It looks like he may hold on. Right now, it's less than 1%. I mean, just a razor edge. And yes, the Republicans very nearly took this governor's seat. And in New York, they went from defund the police to literally elect a cop for mayor. So much for their whole defund the police thing. So there can be a tendency to read too much into certain elections. But there's one thing that's been uniting all of these voters. And I think that the ground has shifted seismically to this extent. People are rejecting all this racialism and Marxist everything, and education's a big driver. Democrats have to be freaking out. I mean, after all, it was Kamala Harris herself who said what happens in the Virginia election will have ramifications for 2022. She probably wants to take this statement back now. Watch.
What happens in Virginia will in large part determine what happens in 2022, 2024, and on.
Yes, let's hope so. For once, we agree. So just 5 big takeaways from last night, first off, okay? So the first thing is that good candidates don't require Trump's heavy presence to win. Glenn Youngkin, he didn't distance himself from Trump. Like, he never disavowed him or anything. He supported Trump, and Trump also did, I think he did a tele-rally and he did some stumping for Glenn Youngkin. But Trump was not a heavy presence in this race like he has been in so many others. And while Terry McAuliffe ran a national race and focused on Trump, Youngkin, he focused on voters. He ran a statewide race. That's key, because most bad campaigns can either attribute their losses to bad candidates, no focus from said candidate, and no message discipline from the campaign. And Youngkin had none of these problems. He was laser focused. And this also signals a normal shift, I think, in the Republican Party, kind of a transfer of the baton, if you will. Republican candidates have to be able to win their own elections without being bailed out all the time. If you make your candidacy about Trump's endorsement and you have the entire party revolve around one person, you're not going to have a candidate who's successful. It's like the spider versus starfish strategy. This is why Democrats struggled so bad after Barack Obama. And it's also why Democrats have suffered a massive messaging fail, because they made it all about Trump. And while they were doing that, Glenn Youngkin, he made it about Glenn Youngkin. I joked on radio that Youngkin is the candidate that Mitt Romney always wanted to be. But unlike Romney, Youngkin doesn't confuse strength with aggression. He was strong on issues, but very amiable. He was a happy warrior, still is. Education, CRT mandates, everything. By the way, this isn't just about CRT, and this is the other big issue. CRT, education, schools being shut down, vax mandates, mask mandates, plus the economy and foreign policy. So exit polling has revealed a wide range of just plain old general dissatisfaction with Democrats. Now, granted, it was driven by education. And it's smart that Glenn Youngkin went right at critical race theory. That's the Marxist institutionalized racism, the ideology that wants to reinstitute state-sanctioned racism in America all over again, right? Youngkin's anti-CRT message completely resonated with parents. But it wasn't just CRT, right? His message on education was so much broader. He defended parental rights. Terry McAuliffe attacked them. He talked about advanced learning, spoke out against insane school closures, the need for greater school safety, pushed back against the hypersexualization of students. And then he also advocated for higher pay for teachers. And then he also talked about the economy, like gas tax and things like inflation. All this stuff deeply resonates with voters, particularly with families, and super particularly those white suburban women who Trump he did not do well with, as well, I should say, in Virginia, as compared to Biden back in 2020. But with Youngkin's mix of positivity and firmness, and of course Terry McAuliffe being just a completely horrid candidate, Youngkin actually really did incredibly well. He actually outperformed Trump in so many different demos. Virginians weren't buying what McAuliffe was selling. Now, here's the other thing. Here's another point. Biden is a deficit for Democrats. Look at this. Deep blue New Jersey going red. Biden has no coattails. This is always, I get it. Here's the thing. I get it that we're a year in, but we should still be kind of in a somewhat quasi post honeymoon, or at least a denouement of a honeymoon, right? I mean, we should at least be in that particular phase. Usually, the honeymoon kind of ends at 5 months into a president's term, the first year, and then reality sets in and those numbers are reflected in the polls, and also if there's any kind of special elections. But Biden has performed worse for candidates than Barack Obama did in 2010 when Barack Obama had no coattails. I mean, Joe Biden doesn't even have a coat. He's a liability to every single Democrat candidate. He's not an asset. McAuliffe was already a bad candidate. He had no discipline. But in addition to fighting Youngkin, and being a bad candidate, he also had to fight Biden's policies. I mean, New Jersey is deep Biden territory, and the GOP were competitive. That's insane. They made bigger gains in a shorter amount of time, especially when you compare what liberals and Marxists have been trying to do in Texas and seed Texas with the whole, Project Blue and all of that. We're not a Marxist country yet. That's another point. Democrats' radical, racialized Marxist agenda is not resonating with America, and it's not resonating with a lot of Democrats as well. In both Virginia and New Jersey, that message was loud and clear. And education drove momentum, but everything from economy to foreign policy all weighed heavily on voters' minds. So this morning, if you looked at Legacy Press, they're going through their 7 stages of grief right now. What stage is rage? They're at rage. They're at the rage stage right now. Watch this hot take from MSNB. Blah, blah.
He flew an insurrection flag at his rallies. He simply didn't. He played dumb about a Zoom rally. He did not really put much distance between himself and Donald Trump on the big lie or the deadly insurrection in which police officers were maimed by flagpoles. So I think that the real ominous thing is that critical race theory, which isn't real, turned the suburbs
question, girl. Be prepared.
15 points to the Trump insurrection endorsed Republican. What do Democrats do about that?
First off, that's what happens when you aren't prepared to ask questions and you sort of just like meander all over the place and you go from one thing to finally you find out where you're going to go and you ask your question. I mean, for the love, her lead up to that was longer than an intro for a Cure song. That was Nicole Wallace at MS. So the deadly insurrection, by the way, there was no cops that were killed at that. The only person who was killed was an unarmed woman, but I digress. So MSNBC's take was that Youngkin flew an insurrectionist flag and ran on the fumes of Trump and that CRT is not real, right? Yeah, except somehow Youngkin still won. So you have to wonder when you watch like hot takes like those, if do they actually believe what they're saying? I mean, do they still think it was an insurrection? Even though the FBI says there wasn't one. Officially, they said that. They think Youngkin's win was about Trump, even though Youngkin never leveraged Trump. They are probably filling their pants right now. Like we've already seen Eric Swalwell try to do that on MSNBC. I'm going to come back to that for forever. By the way, the chaser to that diluted hot take from MSNBC, CRT apparently doesn't exist. Except that it does, and it's actually printed in their handouts, and they've talked about it and defended it after they denied it. They apparently believe that all the parents that are showing up at board meetings are just making all this stuff up, all these parents. So here's another point. The race card is done. Glenn Youngkin outperformed Trump, like I said earlier, in every demo in every county. He increased the GOP's share of the Black, Hispanic, and female vote. And one of the biggest groups fighting CRT and McAuliffe's war on parental sovereignty was led by a Muslim Democrat woman. And by the way, the lieutenant governor of Virginia, well, the lieutenant governor-elect, who has the most awesome first name that I can ever imagine. I mean, can you imagine the first three letters of your name being just Win? It's amazing. WINSOME SEARS, a Marine veteran, an immigrant who is the vision of the great American dream, and she loves her some two-way. Love that. Racial division is all progressives have anymore, and it doesn't work. And by the way, check out this. This is from the lieutenant governor-elect, her speech from last night. I love what she said here. Check this out.
What you are looking at is the American dream. There are some who want to divide us, and we must not let that happen. They would like us to believe we are back in 1963 when my father came. We can live where we want. We can eat where we want. We own the water fountains. We have had a black president elected not once but twice, and here I am, living proof. In case you haven't noticed, I am black, and I have been black all my life.
I mean, her first name is WINSOME. I love it. By the way, do you know WINSOME Sears' story? She's a Marine veteran. She was born in Kingston, Jamaica, and her family immigrated here when she was very young. Her father, all he had was barely $2 in his pocket, worked tons of jobs, and it's a self-made American dream story. And now look at her, a heartbeat away from the governor's mansion. It's amazing. And Sears is right. America is rejecting the division and the racialized politics of the Biden administration. And soon voters all over the country could duplicate Virginia's results by rejecting more of this Marxist garbage. First off, look at this. This is Joy Reid. And I hate playing this stuff from her because I just don't think that she's a good host or a broadcaster. But this is just a default to the laziest analysis. And this is kind of an avatar of this broken rhetoric. Check it.
And the exit polls showed that which was interesting, that the coronavirus, or that the virus, it was a very
has low
was not
salience.
Importance to many of the voters
which
there.
Was fascinating.
It was education,
right,
which is code for white parents don't like the idea of teaching about race.
So I got the impression that Reid was just looking at some of this data and hadn't really prepared. And then as she was looking at it, realized, oh my gosh, I don't know education that's a big common ground issue. So default to race. It's just so dumb. The projection on display in her comments is staggering. And by the way, why in the world are Democrats whitewashing the, not just participation, but the leadership of minority families against this kind of tyranny? That's just disgusting. The left is in the business of weaponizing race. It's their whole entire playbook. They're using that to replace economic status. That's all what critical race theory is all about, Frankfurt School. All parents have done in response to this is say, no thanks, not with my kids. And they did it with their votes. And yet in the Marxist mind, the parents are the racists. I mean, have you seen some of the parents that have been out there? Here's a news flash. They're not all white. I know that's super important to the left, but they're not. Maybe MSNBC hasn't noticed, but it's not just white parents. It's parents of all ethnicities rejecting this Marxist ideology. So, for instance, for Van Jones, who was on CNN, Glenn Youngkin is the true virus. He's a malignant viral threat to America. Now, what's weird is that he said this literally right after a conversation with Anderson Cooper, wherein they both discussed how unbelievably grating and annoying weak Democrat rhetoric, like this next soundbite is. Check it.
When this election is over in Virginia, we will know, have we seen the emergence of the Delta variant of Trumpism? The Delta variant of Trumpism. In other words, Youngkin, same disease, but spreads a lot faster and can get a lot more places.
Do they really want to call people diseases? Like all the moms and dads that just voted to stand up for their kids, they're all diseases? Really? That's like even dumber. I think the McAuliffes mess up. So Democrats are busy fighting Trump and yet losing voters. And they haven't realized that Trump is a boogeyman, doesn't work anymore. The Glenn Youngkin variant, for the love. Well, Virginians apparently couldn't wait to get infected by that particular strain of viral sanity. And if it's a virus, Americans seem to want more of it. I guess common sense is catching. Unhappiness was growing. I mean, just ask Brandon. To own it is to admit the administration's abject failure, the failure at the border, failure in Afghanistan, to move forward on reconciliation, which, by the way, Joe Manchin just said when I was doing my radio program, as he was huddling on the floor with Kyrsten Sinema, Mitch McConnell, and John Thune, that this all completely just confirms all of his objections to the reconciliation package. So this is going nowhere in the Senate. Failure after 3 or 4 years. I mean, this is just Democrats constantly, the engine of failure. Look at this, 9 months into the Biden presidency, and look where everything is. Look how undervalued your dollar is now because of the Bidenflation. And now a major failure for Democrats in Virginia and New Jersey and New York City. And did you see Minneapolis voted to save their police? Austin didn't, but that's the turd in the punch bowl of all these victories. See. Now in New Jersey, Republican challenger Jack Ciattarelli, he was not supposed to be competitive with Democrat incumbent Phil Murphy. It's crazy, but yet he is. And Democrats, I don't think, are paying attention to what's happening. Case in point, here's CNN's, some member of the commentariat on CNN whose hot take isn't worthy of crediting with a name or me spending my precious, valuable time learning it. Watch.
I think we also see the enduring power of the culture wars, and the Republicans are better at playing this game because it's essentially white identity politics. That works for Republicans. We saw it in 2016, and we're seeing it in some of these races now.
Wow, okay. So I guess it's not Democrats attempting a total culture war against America. No, you're the ones doing that. All of the families that made these votes and let education drive how they cast their votes, they're doing that. The statues being torn down, the gender pronouns, the bathrooms, the erasure of women entirely, the forever masking of kids, the forcing of injections against your will, the rioting, the looting, the burning, and the racialization of everything. That's all your imagination, America. It's not happening. See, you have it backwards. Glenn Youngkin is the one prosecuting a cultural war, and so are you. And you thought you were just trying to live your life when Marxist revolutionaries called Democrats seized your government. No, says the Democrat Fourth Estate, known as Legacy Press, you're the problem. You're a carrier of like a variant. I love it now that they're saying that we're viruses. I guess that's a step up from Obama calling everybody enemies. Maybe we should rejoice. I don't know. But here's the thing. Democrats were told by voters that the Marxist core of their party can no longer be sustained. They have to moderate if they want to continue existing electorally. But I doubt that they're going to get that message. History strongly suggests that midterms are going to deliver the next big blow to the incumbent president in the Democrat Party. Much like the conservative revolution of the 90s and that Tea Party quote-unquote shellacking of 2010. See, we had the soccer moms in the 90s. You had security moms in the aughts and school board moms now in 2021. Democrats called them terrorists, and their response was, let's go Terry. Republicans were handed a gift. Biden's precarious legislative agenda is on the rocks, and Democrats will become a lame duck party with a lame duck Speaker of the House and a lame duck Build Back Better, whatever agenda, a lame duck president in his first year, and Democrats, they tried to gaslight America by rubbing salt in an old wound race. But moms and dads weren't fooled. America wasn't fooled. And now it seems that Democrats are only gaslighting themselves. So coming up, we continue the conversation and look ahead to 2022 with Christina Pushaw, who is Ron DeSantis's, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis's press secretary. Also, by the way, have you noticed that the media has kept silent on Florida's COVID recovery and the fact that they have the lowest rates of transmission and hospitalization in the nation? Interesting, because I thought it was all DeSantis' fault. Keep it here. If you don't own a home, you have nothing to fear from home title thieves. But if you own a home and you don't guard it with home title lock, you're inviting home title fraud, one of the fastest growing crimes. Cyber thieves around the world know home values are sky high, and that makes people a target. The crime is simple. A cyber thief can simply forge your name on a property sale form and refile it. And then he's on the deed to your home and you have no idea that you're a victim. And then he can take out loans on your home and vanish, leaving you to prove to police that you didn't commit bank fraud. Home Title Lock puts a virtual barrier around your home's title. And the instant they detect tampering, they help shut it down. If you have equity in your home, guard it with your life. Visit HometitleLock.com, register your address to see if you could be potentially a victim, and enter code radio for 30 free days of protection. That's code radio at HometitleLock.com. Welcome back. So last night was a huge night for Republicans and a sign of things to come in 2022 and beyond. Florida Governor DeSantis, Ron DeSantis, he's up for re-election in 2022. Many are wondering, they're speculating, could he be atop of the GOP ticket in 2024? And this morning, DeSantis weighed in on this year's red wave. Check it out.
This wave is building. I think it was strong last night, but I think it's going to keep building all the way into 2022. And if you go back to the 2010 wave that Republicans had, I think there's more dissatisfaction with what's going on in D.C. Today than there was at this time in that election cycle. And that is good news for Republicans, and that is bad news for Joe Biden and his regime.
Yeah, completely. I think some of the rhetoric around the elections last night were, do you want to be Texas or Florida, Virginia? Yeah, why wouldn't you want to be? Those are great places to live, great states, and yeah, really low taxes. Look at that. If none income-wise in Texas or Florida or Tennessee. Christina Pushaw is the press secretary for Governor Ron DeSantis. She joins us now. Christina, so good to see you. I'm happy that you are with us. And I have to say, it looks like voters, there is a huge bit of common ground that independents and conservatives, Republicans, libertarians, and even people who are identifying as Democrat, they are finding the message of people like Republican Governor DeSantis, people like Glenn Youngkin and others so much more attractive than the Terry McAuliffe fighting with Trump and parents don't have rights over their kids. I wanted to get your reaction to everything that we saw last night.
Right. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said one of the kind of the hallmark of McAuliffe's campaign was saying basically, do you want to be like Florida or like California? Now, I work for the governor of Florida now, but I'm originally from California. And I can tell you, there is absolutely no comparison. I would choose Florida any day of the week and twice on Sunday because it's common sense. It's not about being a Republican, being independent, or being a Democrat. It's about, do you want to have control over your own choices, your own kids' education, health choices, or do you want to be mandated to get injections? Do you want to be mandated to wear a mask everywhere or for your kid to cover their face for 8 hours at school? I think it's just like America's built on freedom. And I think America's back as of last night. The American people in Virginia and in other states as well stood up to this biomedical security state, stood up to this regime and just said enough.
Yeah, they did. They did indeed. And you're right. Things changed last night and you could feel it. You could see it. Just in New Jersey, the fact that it's like barely 1%, you got Murphy up above Jack Hiratelli. That's huge. Republicans were not supposed to be competitive in deep blue Biden country. And looking at this, it's not just, that Republicans had great voter turnout, Christina, but as you know, they were joined by a lot of people who just were done buying what Democrats were selling them. And talk to us a little bit about that as well, because I know people who are Democrat, not anymore. They've been red-pilled literally within the past 12 months, that have moved from New York to Florida, California to Florida. We kind of joke, my husband and I, because we're trying to see like how many of our friends we can lure to Texas, and we've lost 2 so far to Florida. So I am holding that against you. But for the purposes of this interview, I'm going to drop it right now. But there's something that's attractive to that. People love the freedom, and they're Democrats. These are people who voted Democrat.
Right, absolutely. Because, at the end of the day, what unites us as Americans is that we care about individual rights. We care about freedoms. We do not believe that public schools, teachers, school board members, or politicians own our kids and our families. We believe in parents' rights. And so I think all of this stuff just transcends political parties. One amazing statistic I saw, in addition to the fact Virginia went 10 points for Biden last year, exactly a year later, that's like a 13, 14-point swing. But among Latinos and Hispanics in Virginia, they went 2/3 for Biden last year. Now it's 55% voted for Youngkin. So these are not all Republicans. These are people either who were Democrats or maybe independent, maybe apolitical, but just got motivated after, disastrous first year of the Biden administration. Not only the COVID security state nonsense that has done nothing, by the way, to actually stop the spread of the virus, but also just the economic collapse that we're seeing and how Biden refuses to take any responsibility for anything. He's constantly trying to blame our governor, Governor DeSantis in Florida, as well as your governor in Texas, and pretty much any governor of a red state who's trying to make progress on conservative priorities. Biden will just blame them for whatever is going wrong in the country that really rests on the shoulders of his own administration and his own policy failures.
I love the phrase that you used, biomedical security state, because I know that Phil Kerpen and many others who've been looking at the data for this, they compared the results from Florida at one point to that of California or that of New York. And Florida, wide open, still faring better than California or New York, which locked everybody down, shut businesses. And I just remember everyone was going at Ron DeSantis at one point was public enemy number one because people wanted to really hang all of that on him while they were praising Andrew Cuomo. Well, as it turns out, he had really good medical advisors around him. And it was correct. Now, Florida, from what I understand in terms of transmissions and hospitalizations, is at the bottom of the list. That's from the New York Times. That bastion of conservatism. The New York Times writes this. So where are all of the people who are slamming Ron DeSantis? Why aren't they going after all of these other governors, Democrat governors now, that have, they can't explain away their high hospitalization or transmission rates, yet they had lockdowns and mandatory masks.
Right. That's a great observation. And yes, that's correct. Florida is the lowest in the country in terms of new COVID cases right now, in terms of cases per capita, and in terms of transmission. We are actually at maybe a third of the level of California right now, 1/5 of the level of Michigan, which also had a lot of lockdowns and restrictions and everything with their governor. But that just goes to show you all of that is unnecessary. Now, the New York Times did note that in their tracker of all the COVID cases in the country. They update it every day. They don't write stories about it, though. Nobody's reporting that on CNN. Remember, when President Trump was in office last year, every death from COVID was blamed directly on him and his administration. The CNN death counter going up, that was implied to be directly his fault somehow. And then, of course, we found out in the last few months that a lot of the deaths, particularly in the very beginning in New York City, a lot of them were directly Cuomo's fault or the fault of other Democrat governors who sent COVID patients into nursing homes and actually covered up the deaths, which is what they accused DeSantis of doing. He did not do that. Nobody's ever found evidence of that, but it's all projection with Democrats. Unfortunately, that's what we're seeing, and the media just backs them up, pushes these narratives, does not investigate anything that Democrats say. They take it face value. And so, we're proud that Florida shows you do not need these lockdowns, mandates, forced vaccination, any of this stuff in order to bring the cases down. The virus moves in a seasonal pattern. The best thing the governor can do, which our governor did and your governor did as well, is to make early treatment available to everyone. People are going to get COVID. Even vaccinated people get COVID. Half the people at our state treatment sites report that they're fully vaccinated. So this happens, we know. So we want everyone, vaccinated or not, to have access to life-saving treatment. And that's what Governor DeSantis did with the monoclonal antibody sites.
And I think that Governor DeSantis did with regards to this, in addition to not having the mandates, two super smart things when giving these diagnoses of transmission, et cetera, because they pushed the monoclonal antibody treatment, which is huge. You would think that, we were looking for antibodies either as, as a way to help people and ease severity of symptom, and also maybe learn more about this. But one of the and correct me if I'm wrong on this was pretty early on, like right when there were tests to determine whether or not, like when they did the rapid test, like right when those started. I believe that Florida was the only state to do what they called the CT score with the rapid test or with the coronavirus test, meaning if you had a cycle threshold score of I think it was between like 15 to like 40 or something like that to determine whether or not you were clinically contagious or even clinically positive, etc. And that actually put everything in greater perspective, because the way that the press always, as you know, Christina, would report it is that, oh my gosh, a positive case is pretty much a fatality. Everyone's dying. But from what I remember, Florida was like the only state that actually did that. Am I remembering this correctly? Because that's nuance that was invaluable, and I don't know why the rest of the country didn't copy it.
Look, that very well might be correct. I wasn't involved in that at the time, so I can't confirm, but I will check on that because that does sound interesting, and it's not the first time I've heard it, actually. And I know for a fact that Governor DeSantis, he does get deep in the weeds. He likes to look at the details. Since COVID was first discovered, I mean, he's been reading up on every study you can think of about it. And even today, like, he's looking at all the data and trying to figure out like what's important and what's just noise. Now, that's how he came to the conclusion, you know, the best thing that a governor can do, besides protecting people's individual rights and civil liberties, of course, is to make that early treatment available and to make sure that everyone knows about it in the state, because they have to get it like as soon as they get a positive test. Basically, they have about 7 to 10 days, or else it's not quite as effective. But, you know, unfortunately, what we're seeing from the Biden administration and from a lot of other governors in other parts of the country, particularly blue states, they don't even talk about treatment. It's as if they pretend it doesn't exist because they don't want anything to distract from their vaccination efforts. But, you know, that's ridiculous, because as I said, you can still get sick even if you are vaccinated. Maybe you're less likely to get severely ill, but it's a possibility. So everyone should be aware that this is available. This treatment is real. It's free. It saves lives. And so, yeah, I mean, that's why I appreciate living here and working for this governor, because he does actually read. Like, he looks into not only the headline, like the reporting on a study, but what does the study actually say? And oftentimes, as
he follows
you know,
the science.
Yeah, exactly. And as you know, I mean, these headlines about the studies, they don't really portray it accurately a lot of the time.
Yeah, no, they definitely do not. No, I appreciate that about him. Christina Pushaw, we so appreciate you, and also appreciate how vocal you are in defending the truth. Thank you so much for joining us, and please give our best to the governor, and we're praying for the First Lady of Florida as well. Thank you so much.
That's very much appreciated.
All right, folks, coming up, there is a huge trial underway about self-defense. Maybe you've been following some of it. I know one of our previous guests, Andrew Branca, has been talking about it quite a bit. It's the Rittenhouse trial. It's underway. Yesterday was brand new footage was released from the FBI, had not previously been made public, and it shows a pretty clear case for self-defense. So David Hancock, who is the spokesperson for Kyle Rittenhouse and the family, joins me next to discuss this new information and what it means for the case. Stay with us. Thanks to Biden's economic policies, job numbers have been abysmal. Inflation is skyrocketing. Instead of following the former president's pro-business agenda that had the economy booming, Biden wants to tax corporations and pass trillion-dollar bills we can't pay for. It's time for you to take proactive steps to protect your wealth in retirement by investing in gold and precious metals. Legacy Precious Metals can help. Washington keeps printing money to pay for their outrageous bills, but all that does is devalue your dollar. Gold offers you a hedge against inflation, and as the dollar gets weaker, gold gets stronger. The folks at Legacy Precious Metals are the gold standard when it comes to investing in precious metals. They have a team of experts who can counsel you on the best options for you and your family. Don't leave your retirement to chance. Call Legacy Precious Metals at 866-580-2088 or visit them online to download their free investor's guide full of useful info at legacypminvestments.com. The trial of Kyle Rittenhouse is underway, and there have already been some pretty major developments, and some new explosive video entered into evidence yesterday. There's a couple of different videos you can watch. The FBI one has the aerial and then like the thermal footage, but the way that they released it, they had it juxtaposed with some other things. But thankfully, I know our mutual friend Andrew Branca had the full like thermal and aerial shots. That was a very, very interesting video. Joining me now to give us the latest and break it all down is Kyle Rittenhouse and the family's spokesman, David Hancock. David, thanks so much for joining me. This video, why have we never seen this video? I know it's from the FBI. Why have we never seen this before? I'm curious.
That is a perfect question. That video wasn't provided to the defense until about 1 month ago. They had that video since 5 months ago is when they received that video, and they just have not shared it.
Wow. And because that video, I know that it was entered into evidence, it does not help prosecution at all. I mean, if anything, I mean, it really absolutely shows, if anybody had any lingering doubts, that Rittenhouse was pursued. And I know that that's what, at least the narrative going into this case was that, oh, well, he was the instigator and he was the aggressor. But this video, I mean, as if, like, you know, people couldn't tell that from the other video that was out there. But what this video shows is I know that the case has to prove they have to prove their argument beyond reasonable doubt. But David, when I look at this, it just makes the case for self-defense even more, which is what I'm sure defense has pushed. I don't even know how this made it to trial. That's probably why they kept it for 5 months.
I mean, you're absolutely right. What it shows is the individual, Joseph Rosenbaum, was running ahead of Kyle with another man called Joshua Zeminski. They actually set up a position, and then Joseph Rosenbaum came out from a hidden position after Kyle passed, and he attacked him from behind. And so Kyle Rittenhouse actually saw that man, Joshua Zeminski, at the vehicle. He turned around with a pistol in his hand, and that man started to move towards Kyle in a very aggressive and provoking way. So he was essentially ambushed.
Yeah, and you could see there was at one point, for those who can watch the video, that you can see Rosenbaum who's like in this ambush position by when they get over towards the cars near the parking lot. And you also see in this video as Rittenhouse is going through, because he's out there, he has a fire extinguisher, he's putting out a fire, and then he's offering medical. He even at one point yelled, friendly, you know, I'm a friendly, not aggressive at all. That's normally not what, you know, David, that's not what somebody says if they're being aggressive. They don't come up to you with a fire extinguisher trying to put out your fire yelling friendly. I mean, that's, right. And then when he, from what I understand, as he was approaching the vehicle with the fire extinguisher, that's when an adult male who, as I understand it, prohibited possessor, approached him illegally armed. And obviously that, you know, Rittenhouse then at that point left that situation, which to me bolsters, again, the self-defense case more.
100%. That's exactly what happened. He dropped a fire extinguisher and then he fled. And then as he fled, he looked over his shoulder and he saw a madman with his shirt around his face who then was chasing him. That was the same man who actually walked behind them as Kyle was fleeing from Rosenbaum, and he shot his pistol right up into the air. That is why Kyle turned around, and at that moment, the Rosenbaum individual was feet from him, actually inches from him, and he was reaching for his weapon. And that's why Kyle pulled the trigger to defend himself. That man was
reaching for his weapon and screaming at him.
And screaming, F you, from the top of his lungs.
Yeah. And this was that
trial. Just learned in trial that the prosecution was never even looking at Zeminski. Their video highlighted just like this one, but they never put a box. They never considered that Zeminski guy a person of interest. The first shot the entire night, they just showed that they never even considered him a person of interest.
Oh my, that's insane. Because at one point in the parking lot, as Kyle Rittenhouse was walking away, fleeing really, I mean, he was getting away from the danger. Someone threw something at him, which you can see not just on street level camera, but you can also see aerial, you can see it thermal. Someone threw something at him, and I think it's like something like seconds after that, that's when the gunshots rang out from Zeminski.
That's right.
And you could hear them, I mean, in the original videos before this even came out, you could definitely hear that as you saw Rittenhouse, because the narrative was that, oh, he was out there just spraying people, which that's not true. If anything, it was Zeminski who was doing that. And to think that that person was not, I don't know how this can be even a serious consideration for trial when that person is, the aggressor is not even a person of interest. And then second, when it's an open and shut self-defense case, how it even makes it past probable cause to get into prosecution. Like, it just doesn't, it just blows the mind. Your thoughts. I'm just amazed by this.
You're 100% correct. And it was that individual and his wife who was standing next to him who started all the yelling to stop Kyle as he was fleeing towards the police line. He was the instigator of that as well. So he pulled the trigger first, and then he instigated all the rest of the people around to attack Kyle as he's heading towards the police.
Let me ask you this, David. I know that
we just learned in trial that the prosecution actually told one of the police officers not to execute their search warrant on one of the individuals involved named Gage Groskowitz. So they had a valid order, but they were told not to execute it. The Kenosha police were told not to.
And that's more new information. This is all that's incredibly unsettling. David, let me ask you this. You've been there, you've been at the trial. I've checked out some of the live stream, but I haven't been able to watch every bit of it. Have I missed the state presenting evidence that would make this, not a self-defense case? I mean, have they provided any reasonable doubt so far? Because I mean, the only thing that I've seen is they've really only bolstered defense's case, and the judge had to basically excuse himself at one point because he almost snapped the prosecutor in two.
That's right. Yep. They haven't provided anything to indicate that Kyle was the aggressor in any capacity at all, period.
So this seems like malicious prosecution. What do you get that? I mean, obviously, I think that you might share some of that feeling. To me, when I look at this, I think it's malicious.
I believe this has been a malicious prosecution from the first day, period. I mean, they actually filed charges without any sort of meaningful investigation. And they have continued to go after this kid just based on lies and innuendo that is not factually accurate. All that is beginning to come out right now. And so that is a relief.
Last question for you, David, and I appreciate you joining us. What are you anticipating? What are you and the family preparing for as this case progresses? Because I really get the sense that it's almost like we're going through the formality of proving something that ultimately should have been concluded at the close of a proper investigation.
You're 100% true, 100% accurate, and the family is staying strong. I believe that everybody is staying anxious because we believe this thing should have been probably wrapped up a long time ago. So everybody is just staying positive and actually pretty happy that all of these new truths are finally coming into the public domain.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is going to have serious self-defense ramifications. And, people can say, well, he's 17, he shouldn't be out. Well, you shouldn't have had people out rioting in the streets and burning down businesses and assaulting people and murdering people. You shouldn't have had those people out. And maybe if those people hadn't been out in the streets, or better yet, maybe if the city had done its job and protected the tax-paying citizens against that kind of actual dangerous criminality, then maybe we wouldn't have any of this situation in the first place. But if law enforcement are prevented, if they're defunded, and you have the elected leaders that refuse to protect the citizens, the citizens are going to be protecting themselves. So yeah, it very much is an open and to me it's an open and shut case, and I hate to see this prosecutorial maliciousness try to work against self-defense. So we're going to be watching David Hancock, spokesperson for the Rittenhouse family, Kyle Rittenhouse. We're going to be watching this trial and see what progresses and watching it with a close eye. Thanks so much for joining us, and please keep us apprised of any new developments.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you very much.
Of course. So coming up, just talking about police and defunding, Austin, Texas proves yet again that they're on some kind of island of authoritarianism deep in the heart of Texas. I'll explain next. Keep it here. Black Rifle Coffee Company is not your typical coffee company. Black Rifle Coffee develops their explosive roast profiles with the same mission focus they learned while serving in the military. And they've spent thousands of hours tasting and sourcing and perfecting coffee from across the world. They're founded and operated by veterans, and Black Rifle Coffee knows what a quality cup of coffee means to active duty troops who are away from home for the holidays. And so as a result, Black Rifle Coffee, they're committed to supporting all who serve. And with every purchase you make, Black Rifle Coffee gives back. So in 2020 alone, they donated over 6 million cups of coffee to soldiers overseas, law enforcement officers, firefighters on the West Coast, medical workers during the pandemic response. And this November, for every coffee you purchase, a bag of their limited edition holiday roast will be sent to a service member overseas for Christmas morning delivery. So support the cause. Visit blackriflecoffee.com/DanaTV. Check out the freshest coffee in America. That's blackriflecoffee.com/DanaTV for 20% off coffee, apparel, gear, and 20% off your first month of the Coffee Club. Is it possible that Democrats just dislike Republicans so much that they would cut off their police force to spite their own city? And the answer is yes. Yes, that's true. Democrats apparently are filled with seething hatred for the opposition party, so they'll actually harm themselves just to say that they own the cons. Case in point, we traveled to the blueberry and the tomato soup that is Texas. Austin, Texas, particularly, where they decided to cut the budget for the police department in a 68 to 32% vote result. Austin voters rejected a proposition that would have set a minimum staffing level for its police department of 2 officers per 1,000 residents. Now, had the proposition, Prop A, passed, it would have done, number one, mandate a minimum staffing level within the Austin Police Department of 2 officers per every 1,000 residents, or 1,000 residents, and 2, establish a minimum 35% community response time standard. 3, require 40 additional hours of training, because apparently training's bad. And 4, oblige the mayor, city council, and city staff to enroll in the Citizens Police Academy. 5, facilitate minority officer hiring through foreign language proficiency metrics. Sounds like stuff any sane city would want, but not the stay weird city of Austin. Stay weird and stay crime. I don't know. That's just, because their crime has increased dramatically. They're actually looking to have a little more of that California crazy right in the middle of Texas, like homelessness and super high crime, lots of homicides, and not enough police to deal with it all. So a group called Save Austin Now, who understands that Austin needs saving from progressives, they had some success in the past. The group managed to pull off a resounding 60 to 40% victory to reinstate the public camping ban after 2 years of shantytown encampments sprouting up on roadsides and parks and everywhere in public areas. But their Prop A to shore up their police department, they did not have such luck because progressive groups didn't want any of it. Not when owning the cons is so much more fulfilling. Listen to what one progressive group leader, Chaz Moore, that opposed Prop A, had to say, saying, quote, "This vote shows that Austinites saw through all the lies from the police union and the GOP. I'm proud of this city and everyone who came out to vote," end quote. All the criminals everywhere celebrating. See, progressives like Chaz are happy to hurt their own city as long as they can own the cons. Austin wants to stay weird and dangerous and repeat history for themselves because owning the cons is apparently all that matters. Austin PD is already down over 300 officers from its staffing level just 2 years ago because a lot of them are just looking to retire early. And, as it turns out, officers like cities that actually support their challenging work. So Austin is having trouble replacing those officers. So weird. Actually, it's not. It's like what you might expect. Cause and effect, we learned that in elementary school. What is weird is why anybody would want to live in Austin at this point. And if you did live there, you'd be hell-bent on your own destruction by not properly funding your police. Wow. So that does it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Good night, and don't bend the knee.